Welcome back to our channel, where we provide updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her royal family. We bring you exciting news. Royal watchers did not expect this. The signatures were still wet when the storm began. King Charles, with one stroke, cut through tradition. Princess Charlotte, stripped of every style she carried since birth. And then, as if to replace one crown with another, the king raised her into the oldest, sharpest role for a daughter of the monarchy, Princess Royal. This was not a soft adjustment. It was a blow to the old hierarchy, a recalibration of who counts, who speaks, who inherits honor when honor is tested. Charlotte is 10, yet in a system measured by centuries, age is secondary. The symbol is primary. The move speaks louder than her years. Enter it into the record, the chain of events that framed the decision. 2013. Succession to the Crown Act. Male primogeniture ends. Daughters hold their line. For the first time in the Windsor script, a sister does not fall behind a brother. 2018. Prince Louis arrives. Charlotte does not drop. Her rank survives. Quiet revolution. Legal ink securing her place. 2022. Elizabeth dies. Charles ascends. Charlotte moves from Cambridge to Wales. Another recalibration. Ceremonial yet sharp. 2025. The decree. Strip, replace, reposition. Princess Royal. Each line looks tidy. Each line was contested. The cost is not in letters on paper, but in the shockwave through tradition. Why now? The palace answer is discipline. The private answer is survival. The monarchy faces storm conditions, health crises, thin benches, public suspicion of excess. In that weather, every role must be justified. Titles that hang without duty are trimmed. Titles that anchor stability are reinforced. Charlotte becomes the anchor. Behind closed doors, the discussion was blunt. William wanted clarity, no ambiguity about his daughter's rank. Anne demanded continuity. The Princess Royal tradition must not wither. Charles accepted both. The solution: act early, signal strength. Leave no vacuum when the present Princess Royal cannot serve forever. But the drama lies in what was cut. Charlotte lost the styles tied to Cambridge, to her father's transition titles, even the grace notes of birth order, all swept into one designation. One heavy, historic name, Princess Royal. The message is clear: no parallel labels, no confusion about her future lane. She is not just a child in line, she is the named daughter of continuity. Observers gasped. Commentators split. Some hailed it as bold modernization, cut clutter, sharpen image. Others saw cruelty, a child carrying symbolic weight before adolescence. Supporters cited discipline. Critics called it theater. Yet the deeper axis is power. The Princess Royal title is not a ribbon. It is senior rank, proximity to the crown, a working template set by Princess Anne across 4 decades. Tireless service, international representation, discipline without end. To hand that frame to a girl of 10 is not ceremonial play. It is a training signal. It is the palace saying, we shape her now, so she carries later. Enter it into the record, the design premises whispered behind Windsor walls. Succession first. No backward slides. No gender shortcuts. Lean core. One title that matters more than 3 that confuse. Early conditioning. Prepare her now. Spare her later. International signal. France. The Commonwealth. The digital crowd. They all see the move. The risk list was read just as starkly. Optics. Is this a burden or an honor? Public judgment will decide. Law. Can a minor bear a title that presumes senior function? Legal scholars already sharpen pens. Family. Anne still holds Princess Royal. How to explain overlap? The decree is clear. The title is styled now, effective later. Symbol today, function tomorrow. Camilla. Stripped from the emergency chain. Relegated to program work. The consort lane narrows. This is not gentle gossip. It is structural shock. Charlotte now stands in 2 worlds at once. To the public, a child with a bright smile, walking to school with her brothers. To the institution, the next senior female royal, already measured against her aunt's iron record. The stakes rise because of precedent. Princess Anne did not receive the title until 1987, age 36. Charlotte receives it at 10. The gap is a statement. The king does not trust time. He does not trust tradition to hold. He forces the issue early, and so the monarchy bends again. In Paris, the dinner scene escalated it further. Charles declared her Duchess of Brittany. Macron's face betrayed shock. Diplomats scrambled. For a moment, a family title became a diplomatic flashpoint. France does not forget Brittany's history. nor does Europe forgive breaches of protocol lightly. But Charlotte stood, curtsied, and spoke. French, flawless. English, steady. She turned a brewing crisis into applause. At 10, a feat adults could not stage. The applause echoes still, but beneath it, lawyers mutter. Can a child hold such foreign-facing titles? Can a king revive dormant claims without parliament? Is this symbolic showmanship or constitutional overreach? The monarchy's defenders call it bold. Its skeptics call it reckless. The truth is likely both. Charlotte is now the symbol of reform colliding with tradition. Her titles are no longer markers of birth. They are chess pieces in a strategy. Slim the monarchy, sharpen its line, and project youth as destiny. She did not ask for this. She embodies it. The ledger is open. Gains and losses will be tallied not in weeks, but in decades. Yet the first move has been made. A child's crown has been tightened. The world is watching. The palace corridor was silent, but the weight of the signatures rang like steel. Charlotte's new title was no longer just a family matter. It was an institutional adjustment, a recalibration of the monarchy's operating system. Enter it into the record what this really means. Clause by clause, the new designation folds her into the chain of service. Not a symbolic ribbon, but a functional pathway. The title Princess Royal does not wait for adulthood to matter. It shapes expectation from the moment it is bestowed. The logic inside the palace briefing papers was blunt. Prepare now, so the monarchy does not stall later. The king's diagnosis had already pushed the system to the edge. In 2024, when both Catherine and Anne suffered health constraints, the roster looked thin. The court discovered how fragile the chain really was. That vulnerability is the reason behind the shock. The decision is less about Charlotte's smile, more about survival under strain. Anne's record was read aloud during the private sessions. More than 20,000 engagements, more than 1,000 overseas visits, receipts for work stacked higher than titles. That image was placed side by side with Charlotte's age. The gap looked impossible, but the message from the king was harder. Start bridging the gap now, because time is the one asset no one can print. This is why William pressed for clarity. He remembered the headlines when his wife stepped back for treatment. He remembered the frenzy when Anne's accident left her absent for weeks. He remembered the duty rosters groaning under shortage. He saw the machine slow. He wanted his daughter written in, not left hovering in symbolic space. Charlotte did not sign the decree. She did not write the clauses, but she was written into them. The effect is irreversible. Outside, reactions split. Supporters spoke of modernization, gender equality, a monarchy that finally elevates daughters to equal rank. Skeptics accused the palace of overburdening a child, turning her into a constitutional prop before adolescence. But the larger tremor lies in diplomacy. The Brittany Declaration in Paris was more than theater. It was a test balloon. Charles wanted to see how allies and adversaries would react to a child carrying a title bound to contested history. The reaction was instant. Macron startled, Europe cautious, Commonwealth nations supportive. The lesson: a child can soften what an adult cannot. A child can be framed as the future, not a threat. That is why the risk was taken. Charlotte herself turned the room. Fluent, French, calm poise, no stumble. Macron admitted later he was disarmed. What could have been a diplomatic breach became an unlikely showcase of resilience. Behind that performance was no accident. Reports now surface of 18 months of hidden preparation. Language drills, diplomatic simulations, Commonwealth studies. A curriculum designed not for school but for statecraft. Only a handful knew. Tutors sworn to silence. Notes destroyed after sessions. The palace did not stage manage a miracle. It engineered one. Enter it into the record the elements of the hidden training. Languages: French, Spanish, German, Mandarin. Not grammar drills but diplomatic nuance. Tone, rhythm, gesture. Simulations: mock negotiations, crisis scenarios, role play with seasoned diplomats. Commonwealth immersion: histories, challenges, youth issues. Not read as textbooks, but discussed with peers across continents. Speech discipline: project authority without arrogance. Empathy without fragility. Each piece built a foundation. Each session layered the weight of expectation early. The question now is not whether Charlotte can perform. She already did. The question is whether the monarchy can manage the consequences of using a child as a symbol and instrument. Legal experts are sharpening knives. They argue the king has edged beyond constitutional guardrails. Reviving Brittany is not harmless. It touches old territorial claims. Creating new responsibilities without parliament risks precedent. Could a monarch invent roles at will? Could a child be written into functions that have never before existed? Parliamentarians mutter, but softly. No one wants to be cast as hostile to a child. Yet the risk is structural. If unchecked, the precedent may outlive this reign. Commonwealth leaders weigh opportunity. Canada, Australia, and Caribbean nations responded warmly. They see advantage in aligning with youth leadership. But others fear entanglement. A title conferred in London may ripple into their constitutions. Some hint at referendums. Others whisper about independence. The machine of monarchy thrives on predictability. This move injects unpredictability at its core. Charlotte's letters to Commonwealth leaders only deepened the impression that this was no ceremonial show. Written in her own hand, guided but sincere, she outlined visions of youth education and digital literacy. Leaders responded with invitations, with enthusiasm. The public read those letters as authentic. For once, a royal voice spoke like one of their own children. That credibility cannot be staged. But credibility comes with risk. If she falters, the backlash will not be gentle. If she thrives, the crown leans harder on her. Either path accelerates the timeline of responsibility. The monarchy has always traded in symbols. Charlotte now embodies its most dangerous one. The gamble that youth can steady an institution older than nations. The applause from Paris fades. The hashtags are cool. The crisis behind the applause remains. Constitutional experts warn of legal fractures. The media continues to demand clarity. Families whisper about burden. And still, the child stands at the center, wearing a title that once belonged to seasoned women in their 30s. The cost of this experiment will not be seen in weeks or months. It will unfold across years, across the line of succession, across the Commonwealth itself. The gamble is written, the ledger is open. What began as a decree on paper has become a test of survival in the open air. The applause of Paris was loud, but the silence of Westminster was louder. The spectacle had passed. The paperwork remained. Every clause of the King's decree was under quiet review. Lawyers, clerks, advisors, all searching for cracks in the logic. Enter it into the record, the constitutional fault lines. Clause 1. A monarch cannot invent sovereignty. Yet Charles's declaration of Charlotte as Duchess of Brittany brushed against centuries of French soil. The law said nothing about such a title in modern Britain. That silence was not safe. It was dangerous. Because silence can be read as space to move or as absence of authority. Clause 2. The role of protector of the Commonwealth realms. No statute provides for it. No parliament approved it. Yet Charles spoke it aloud before the cameras, elevating a child into a quasi-executive lane. Supporters cheered symbolism. Scholars warned of precedent. If a king can name roles at will, where does it end? Clause 3. The Princess Royal title, while Anne still holds it. Tradition is clear, one at a time. The decree finessed the issue by styling Charlotte now, activating later. But the ambiguity lingers. Two Princess Royals are waiting. A tension between aunt and niece, managed by words on paper but felt in the bloodstream of the family. The risks stacked fast. Legalists warned of Parliament's sovereignty being tested. Diplomats fretted over French sensitivities. Constitutionalists raised alarms about overloading a child with symbolic duty. Yet the palace held the line. The king's press office repeated the mantra. Short statement, long record. The king has exercised his prerogative in the best interest of continuity. Nothing more, nothing less. But in the digital square, silence is noise. Social media lit like fire. Hashtags divided the globe. Number Duchess Charlotte versus number too young for power. Supporters praised her as a modern voice, an emblem of equality. Critics saw exploitation, a child turned into a pawn. Memes mocked, threads dissected, pundits speculated. The monarchy became content once again. Inside the family, the mood was taut. William shielded his daughter, avoiding public comment, but his presence in briefings was constant. Catherine weighed every calendar decision, balancing motherhood against institutional demands. Anne kept to her doctrine, receipts, not feelings. Camilla remained silent, her new reduced lane stark against the noise of Charlotte's rise. The private secretary's notes described the mood in one phrase: a storm disguised as applause. For the Commonwealth, the gamble created split responses. Leaders in Canada and New Zealand offered warm congratulations, framing Charlotte's appointment as a symbol of shared future. In the Caribbean, voices diverged. Some saw inspiration. Others saw one more reminder of colonial shadows. In Australia, Republicans used the moment as proof of monarchy's overreach. Yet youth groups responded differently. They posted Charlotte's French speech, her letters, her handwritten notes. They saw in her not a relic of the empire, but a peer, speaking across oceans. The irony: the child softened the monarchy's image where adults had failed. The machine of monarchy thrives on predictability. Charlotte injected unpredictability at its core. The question that dominated the legal briefings: can a 10-year-old hold responsibility, even symbolically, without destabilizing the system? The precedent said no. History offered nothing. Yet here she was, not only holding a title, but executing gestures with global resonance. Supporters inside the palace whispered the same argument. She is not acting alone. Every letter drafted under guidance. Every speech was rehearsed. Every appearance is planned. But the public does not see scaffolding. They see a child speaking French to Macron. They see sincerity. They see legitimacy. And legitimacy, once seen, is hard to retract. Enter it into the record the risks outlined by constitutional scholars. Legal risk. Parliamentary sovereignty tested. If unchallenged, precedent expands the Crown's discretion. Diplomatic risk. Brittany title revives dormant disputes. France may tolerate a child, future governments may not. Psychological risk. Burdening a child with adult expectations. Applause today may sour into scrutiny tomorrow. Institutional risk. Two princess royals on paper. Ambiguity corrodes tradition. Mitigations were proposed. Publish service ledgers to show output, not burden. Keep Charlotte's engagements measured. Anchor her role in education and youth programs to avoid political fire. Frame every act as symbolic, never executive. But even with mitigations, the risk ledger remained heavy. Charlotte herself became the paradox. A child shielded by parents, yet thrust into the global spotlight. A figure both innocent and instrumental. To the monarchy, she was the proof of adaptation. To critics, she was the evidence of desperation. What began as applause now edged toward the test. How long can a child bear the Crown's expectations without fracture? The question will not be answered in headlines. It will be answered in years, in how she grows, in how the institution bends around her. For now, the ledger stands. A storm in law, a storm in diplomacy, a storm in family, all carried by one child's shoulders. And the palace, silent as ever, lets the paper speak. Behind the applause, the family ledger shifted. Titles are not just honors, they are signals of loyalty and rivalry. Every adjustment alters the balance inside the Windsor household. Enter it into the record the tensions. William stood as protector. He insisted that Charlotte's pathway must be clear, not cluttered with half measures. He wanted her shielded, yet defined. His logic: uncertainty fuels speculation. Better one heavy title now than a dozen contested ones later. Catherine's equation was different. As a mother, she saw the burden. As Princess of Wales, she saw the necessity. She has walked the tightrope of public duty under constant glare. She knows how titles can become cages. Her response was quiet, but firm. If Charlotte carries this, she must be prepared, not paraded. Hence the hidden education, the 18-month program crafted in secrecy. Anne, still Princess Royal, accepted the overlap without sentiment. Her creed is receipts, not feelings. Yet even she raised one warning: discipline must govern every act. If the new Princess Royal wavers, the tradition she built over 4 decades could fracture. Anne's presence in the discussions was described as the metronome. She did not raise her voice, but every word cut through the ceremony. Camilla was the shadow. Once styled as consort backup, she now saw her constitutional role trimmed to programs. The shift was explained as an operational necessity, but to her supporters, it looked like exile. Her silence since the decree has been read 100 ways: resignation, quiet protest, or tactical patience. Inside Balmoral and Windsor, the atmosphere hardened. The family dinners carried less warmth, more calculation. Every glance at Charlotte reminded them of a decision already inked. Some felt pride, others felt discomfort. All felt the weight. The training itself became a whisper network. Language tutors slipping through side doors, retired diplomats staging role-play sessions in empty halls, mock press conferences with cameras turned inward, a child rehearsing adult scripts in the privacy of palace rooms. Staff described it not as play, but as rehearsal for storms. The content was surgical. Negotiation drills where Charlotte learned to pause before answering, to ask questions before conceding. Briefings on Commonwealth, challenges literacy, digital gaps, climate anxiety. Exercises in empathy, listening to children her age from Africa, the Caribbean, Asia. Sessions where she said little, but absorbed much. The secrecy was total. Even senior aides did not know the full scope. Those who did signed papers, pledges, oaths. The king himself monitored progress, asking for weekly reports, occasionally stepping in to observe. What emerged in Paris was not instinct alone. It was designed. The curtsy, the French speech, the poise, all results of preparation invisible to the cameras. But preparation creates its own risks. If the public learns how carefully managed it all was, admiration may turn into suspicion. Was it authentic or engineered? Was it leadership or choreography? The monarchy lives on trust. Too much stagecraft erodes that trust. Enter it into the record the paradox. A child authentic in presence, but engineered in preparation. A title ancient in tradition, but modern in application. A family united in decision, but divided in sentiment. The monarchy has often bent young shoulders. Elizabeth herself took oaths at 25. William and Harry walked behind their mother's coffin at 15 and 12. But Charlotte's case is different. She is 10, and her weight is institutional, not symbolic grief. The whispers ask the hardest question. If the system now needs a child to stand steady, how strong is the system itself? The applause from Paris cannot erase that question. It can only delay it. Parliament could not stay silent forever. What looked like applause abroad began to sound like alarm in Westminster. The issue was not Charlotte's charm. It was the precedent written in silence. Enter it into the record the questions MPs whispered in committee rooms. Can a monarch revive dormant titles without Parliament? Can a child be written into a constitutional lane not defined by law? And most pressing, if this passes unchallenged, what prevents future monarchs from inventing powers wholesale? Opposition benches sharpened their language. A constitutional experiment with a 10-year-old at its center. One MP muttered on record. Ministers, caught between respect for the crown and duty to Parliament, stalled. No one wanted to appear hostile to a child, yet no one wanted to concede sovereignty by precedent. The chamber filled with half-sentences, careful pauses, words that carried no resolution. Outside, legal scholars filled the void. Articles warned of a dangerous expansion of prerogative. Law journals asked whether reviving the Duchess of Brittany was symbolic theater or a breach of diplomatic etiquette with real consequences. Some argued the act could complicate trade talks with Europe. Others said it was merely ceremonial, no sharper than a toast. France remained cautious. Macron's smile in Paris had cooled into bureaucratic distance. Advisors noted that even symbolic claims could resurface in unexpected disputes. The French Foreign Office filed a note. No legal standing, but politically sensitive. Europe read between the lines. In the Commonwealth, reactions diverged. Canada and Australia leaned supportive, framing Charlotte as a youth figure. Jamaica and Barbados saw something else, a reminder of monarchy's reach at a time when Republican sentiment was rising. Editorials asked whether investing hope in a child royal was progress or regression. Meanwhile, public polling in Britain swung strangely. Approval ratings for Charlotte soared. She became the most popular figure of her generation. Yet support for Charles dipped. The public adored the child, but mistrusted the architecture that placed her there. Enter it into the record the risk ledger tightening. Legal fracture. Prerogative stretched. Parliament hesitant. Diplomatic strain. France unsettled. Europe cautious. Commonwealth split. Allies warm. Republicans colder. Public paradox. Child adored. Crown questioned. The palace responded with its doctrine. Short statement, long record. The king acts within prerogative. Duties remain ceremonial. Oversight remains intact. Nothing more. The silence was deliberate. But silence did not cool the digital storm. Social media pushed narratives faster than Parliament could parse them. Hashtags painted Charlotte as savior, victim, puppet, pioneer. Each narrative ran unchecked. The palace refused to engage. The machine spoke only in receipts. Engagements logged, speeches recorded, outcomes measured. Yet receipts themselves created pressure. Charlotte's first official letters to Commonwealth leaders leaked. Her words about literacy and climate spread like wildfire. They were read not as ceremonial but as policy. The public judged them on substance. Leaders replied with warmth. Suddenly, a 10-year-old had shaped international discourse more effectively than a dozen ministers. Inside the government, unease sharpened. Civil servants noted the contradiction. A role described as ceremonial producing effects with policy weight. If it shapes decisions, it is not symbolic, one advisor wrote. The line between image and influence blurred. What began as a decree had become a live test of Britain's constitutional firewall. The palace bet on Charlotte's poise. Parliament now faced the bill. The crisis is not open yet, but it breathes under the floorboards. One misstep, one clash of precedent, and politics and applause could collapse into confrontation. For now, the child carries both adoration and suspicion, and the monarchy, as always, lets her face what it cannot answer itself. The monarchy has always lived in paradox, tradition and adaptation, silence and spectacle, ceremony and survival. Princess Charlotte's sudden elevation crystallizes all of these tensions into one child-sized figure. The applause has not faded, but the questions grow louder. Enter it into the record, the core dilemmas that define the next decade. First, authenticity versus engineering. Charlotte's poise in Paris, her letters to Commonwealth leaders, her fluency in French, these were celebrated as natural gifts. Yet insiders know they were the product of 18 months of hidden training, authentic presence shaped by engineered preparation. The public believes in her sincerity. But what happens when they learn how carefully crafted the performance has been? Does admiration deepen, or does trust fracture? Second, continuity versus burden. At 10 years old, Charlotte now carries the symbolic role once bestowed on women in their 30s. The monarchy frames it as prudence shaping early to prepare later. But childhood cannot be rehearsed twice. Every curtsy, every briefing, every letter replaces a piece of ordinary life with extraordinary duty. The burden is cumulative. History teaches that crowns carried too early leave scars. Third, sovereignty versus sentiment. Parliament knows its sovereignty is being tested. The king's revival of Brittany, an invention of protector of the Commonwealth realms, stretched prerogative into uncharted territory. Legislators hesitate, unwilling to oppose a child, but the precedent is dangerous. Every silence today is permission tomorrow. If unchecked, the monarchy risks inflating its discretionary powers beyond the limits of modern constitutional balance. Fourth, diplomacy versus theater. France smiled politely, but the Foreign Office filed notes. Commonwealth leaders applauded warmly, but Republicans sharpened arguments. A child softened edges abroad, yet symbolism cannot erase geopolitics. Titles revive memories. Declarations shift perceptions. What begins as theater often ends as policy. Fifth, popularity versus trust. Polls show Charlotte adored. Her image is fresh, innocent, inspiring. But the same polls show rising skepticism toward Charles. The paradox is stark. The child strengthens the crown's face, but weakens confidence in the king's judgment. Public trust cannot be outsourced to a minor forever. The palace counts on discipline. Short statement, long record. But discipline alone cannot erase human cost. Charlotte's path is now locked. The world expects performance. Failure will not be forgiven as childhood. Success will only raise the bar higher. Enter it into the record, the endurance tests already mapped. Within 2 years, her first official overseas visit. Within 5 years, adolescence is under global scrutiny. Within a decade, adulthood is framed by decades of expectation. Each step will be judged not only as her growth, but as proof of the monarchy's adaptability. Inside the family, the balance remains fragile. William carries the protector role. Catherine manages the line between motherhood and statehood. Anne enforces the doctrine of receipts. Camilla, repositioned, continues her program quietly, but cannot erase the sting of reduction. Charles, at the center, gambles that his granddaughter's promise will outlast his reign. The gamble is bold. It is also dangerous, because every gain comes with a shadow. The applause in Paris was real, but so was the legal unease in London. The warmth from Canada and New Zealand was genuine, but so was the cold hesitation in the Caribbean. The admiration for Charlotte's French speech was sincere, but so were the whispers about stagecraft. This is the monarchy's paradox. To survive, it must adapt. To adapt, it must gamble. And in gambling, it risks losing the very stability it seeks to preserve. Charlotte now stands as a symbol of that gamble. She is the bridge between tradition and experiment, between ceremony and calculation, between childhood and responsibility. If she thrives, the monarchy buys decades of legitimacy. A modern, disciplined, youthful face at the center of continuity. If she falters, the gamble exposes desperation, an institution willing to use a child as a shield against its own fragility. History will not wait to decide. Already, scholars write of the Charlotte experiment. Already, comparisons are drawn with Elizabeth at 25, with Anne's decades of service, with Charles's own late ascendancy. Already, the narrative takes root. A child pressed into service to steady an aging crown. Enter it into the record, the final pillars of this transformation. Legitimacy, rooted now not only in bloodline, but in performance. Performance, measured not in ribbon cuttings, but in outcomes logged and published. Public trust, harder to earn, easier to lose. This is the architecture Charles leaves behind. A monarchy is slimmer, sharper, but riskier. Its stability is bound to the shoulders of one child named Princess Royal before she reaches adolescence. The applause will echo for years, but applause is not permanent. Permanence is built on receipts, on outcomes, on the ability to turn sympathy into trust, and trust into continuity. Charlotte is now more than a granddaughter. She is the monarchy's frontline experiment, and experiments, by definition, can fail. The crown knows this. The family feels this. The world watches this. What remains is endurance. Can the monarchy repeat the discipline year after year, through adolescence, through adulthood, until the experiment becomes tradition? Or will the gamble collapse under the weight of its own ambition? Enter it into the record, without flourish. A child carries the crown's future. The king has gambled everything on her success. The outcome will decide not only her fate, but the survival of the House of Windsor itself.